Hello, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here today to facilitate this session with all the panelists around here on the stage. Let me introduce the topic of today: driving the renewable revolution within the future global energy mix. As a first intro, as you all know, the global renewable energy has been, tremendous growth over the last few years. If you look at, the additional capacity, in 2023 it was almost 5 gigawatts, meaning that the coal at some point will be surpassed by the renewable energies. And the renewable energies and the electron will become one of the first sources of electricity for 2025, if the forecasts are correct. Let's see. And when we look at, it was globally, but when we look at India, India has emerged as a strong contributor to the renewable energy space. Last year, the additional capacity was around 27 gigawatts, meaning that they're reaching now 200 gigawatts, which is a major step, and I'm pretty sure that it's going to keep going. However, as you all know, in the renewable space, there's a lot of challenges, which is really inherent to the renewable energies. I'm talking about the intermittency, meaning that you need to be equipped with power flexibility. We're going to talk about hydro, but also batteries and CCGT on that. But it's also a lot of challenges on the financial part, because we need to make sure we can secure the capital for the development. It's also challenges about the supply chain, which is also linked to the supply and demand that we have. A lot of disruption on this, but it's also about the regulation, the framework that we could have in different countries, and I think it's key important. So let's talk about the different challenges and, of course, opportunity in renewable space with our panelists here. Okay, so maybe let's start with the first question to NHPC. So NHPC has been traditionally an hydropower centric company. So my first question to you would be, what would be your role, or how do you envision the role of NHPC in this space, in renewable space, and what the strategy can enhance its contribution to a diversified, clean energy mix?
NHPC, a premier hydropower organization, you are true that of India, it is a premier hydropower organization. We have completed almost 22 hydropower stations, having capacity more than 6,600 megawatt. But at the same time, with the need of the country for the transition of energy to support the requirement of the country, so we have also ventured into solar power, wind power, pumped storage scheme, green hydrogen scheme, battery energy storage scheme. So all sorts of renewable energy sources and storage scheme. As of now, although we have commissioned around 212 megawatt renewable energy from solar and wind power, but under construction is 1,500 megawatt around. And we are developing solar park of 1,300 megawatt in Uttar Pradesh. So in this way, and apart from that, because so much we are adding so much of intermittent sources of energy, solar, wind power, and so, then there is a prime need of the storage scheme. So in that case, storage also, we have gone into the business of battery energy storage. Recently, Ministry of Power has assigned the battery energy storage implementing agency to NHPC, to SJVNL, and to NTPC. We have been given the target of 1,500 megawatt hour, and we are going ahead with this. Similarly, pumped storage scheme, because storage is very much required to support the grid, to sustain, for the reliability of the grid. So we are working on 20 pumped storage scheme of capacity around 20 gigawatt. So in various states of the country, that is in DPR preparation stage and some PFR preparation stage. So these are there. These are our contribution towards the energy transition and the mission of the country for the energy transition.
No, you're right. I mean, it will be very critical, and power flexibility. It goes with the renewable energy. Otherwise, it will be difficult. Maybe on another front, on the demand, maybe to Ayana, question for you. With the growing renewable energy demand, I mean, do you see any demand or evolution in terms of different application of usage, or what's the different trends that you can see in the emerging new markets?
Yeah, firstly, as a country, I think our per capita consumption, we are quite on the lower side itself in terms of the amount of energy that we consume today. And typically, historically, we have followed in terms of whatever the GDP growth has been. Accordingly, we have seen the growth of the electricity. But of late, the demand is increasing and the capacity addition is increasing in addition. So with respect to particularly on the AI and other usage now, one of the biggest demand that is going to be seen coming is from the data centers. The data centers have huge requirements, and the other aspects of the data centers is around 24/7 power requirements and for huge capacities. That's one of the biggest growth that we are trying to see in terms. And most of the data centers today are looking at establishing basis clean power, which means they need to have round the clock clean power. In addition to that, we are seeing a lot of demand on the clean energy in terms of the electric vehicles, the charging stations and everything else that are coming up in the country. And as you can see, the number of electric vehicle launches that we have seen has been tremendous. Added to that, one of the other areas also which has seen a lot of improvement is around energy efficiency, because most of the areas now are looking at that. But coupled with all of these things which I mentioned, I think we're going to see a huge demand coming up in terms of the energy requirement, especially on the clean energy side, and that's going to probably increase considerably from the current rate at which we are going now.
You were talking about AI and data center, which is a huge demand. I mean, across the globe. I mean, the US here, many locations. Maybe a question to all of you, because I mean, on AI is kind of not fancy, but let's say good topic right now to talk about AI. But how you integrate AI in your different operation for all of you? Maybe this question.
I think AI is going to play a vital role. If you say, going forward, the plain vanilla solar or wind is going to exhaust in India, because the demand is different. As my colleagues have said, they need 24/7 hours, or at least it should meet the peak powers, right? Now, for this, what is essential is to integration. And whenever there is integration, and the integration in the solar, wind, battery system or PHPs, but along with the weather conditions, the AI is enormously used for the benefit of the society, for the benefit of the optimization of the solar plants or the renewable plants. So particularly, yes, I believe in person that AI will make and remove the threat that the cost will go up by the usage of a battery storage, which is having their own limitation with respect to efficiencies and others, right? So certainly, I go with that. Yes, we have to integrate the battery, we have to integrate the PSP, the weather conditions, the renewable energy sources, different sources, and AI will going to play a very vital role for this integration.
Somewhere else wants to answer about AI or? No?
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. It's just words opening on the.
Maybe a little more on the AI stuff in terms of integration with the renewable is, one is in terms of the existing plants that are operating. with the sensors and other data that one can get in. So there is a huge possibility for the AI to play a role in maximizing the output with the existing plants itself. That's number one. Number two is that would really help you in terms of analyzing the performances, the failures, and everything else, which means that you can then predict more accurately what the future problems could be and take proactive steps in preventing those things. And other aspects on AI, what we are really looking at is in terms of the climate change, because that's one of the biggest risks of this business. So, being able to forecast what the weather is going to be, because that is how you need to schedule your power to the grid. And also, while you are investing, you need to be predicting the next 25, 30 years what the climatic changes are going to be while you model in terms of your energy yields based on the technology that you use. So all these aspects will really bring in a huge value and a shift in terms of how we are trying to evaluate the investments and how we are trying to manage the operation and maintenance of these plants. So there's a lot of investment that's already happening. We as a company are putting in a lot of trained resources working on these areas. So at the click of a button or on a mobile, we are able to get everything today. And this is going to only increase. So I guess AI and Gen AI both will definitely be bringing in a lot more value to this sector.
Maybe to Octopus. Octopus Energy has been pioneer in dynamic pricing and flexible energy tariffs for your customers. So how do you suggest integrating this technology into its project? And what challenge remain? Sorry, how can customer? I missed the line. How can customer participation or innovation be further leveraged to balance grid and accelerate the renewable adoption?
Thank you, and delighted to be here on this panel. At Octopus, we very much see ourselves more as a technology company than an energy company, actually. And what we wanted to do was electrify society as quickly as possible, but starting with households, so customer homes. I think I&C, so industrial and commercial flexibility, is probably much better understood at a global level. But homes and households, because there are so many of them, and the granularity of the data makes it more complex, I think is a world that until now hasn't been explored quite as thoroughly. So when we built our technology system that integrates energy generation at the one end with households and homes and does everything in between, we wanted to start actually at the homes end and work backwards. So we've designed a number of things, all that use dynamic pricing and price signals to the end customer to be able to create flexibility in the system and help them ultimately make sure that renewable energy, which is the cheapest energy in the world to produce, is actually the cheapest energy to use. And in so many of our countries around the world, that yet isn't something that is true for homes and households. So it's been very important to us. So some of the things that we do, for instance, is with our onshore wind fleet, we have a tariff that productizes using energy for households. So it's called the Fan Club because they look like giant fans. They're very close by to communities. And of course, we want to create fans of wind energy. And when you live close by to one of those wind turbines, we want to make sure that customers get cheaper energy anyway because they live in a local area for the transmission grid and the electrons should be traveling a shorter distance. So they shouldn't have to pay the costs of entering the national network. So they get 20% off their bill for living close by. But then we send them a price signal when it's super windy and there's an abundance of energy going through that system. And we'll say, if you use energy now and you either turn the washing machine on or do your household chores or charge your EV if you have one, you can get as much as 50% off your energy bill. It's actually turned the way that we even create renewables on its head. So not only is this an exploration into the way flexibility can work in the system, but even the way that we develop renewables, which can be in a decentralized way, near to sources of demand, which actually get discounts and cheaper electrons and cheaper energy bills ultimately for responding to those price signals. We also do that in times when essentially the demand is exceeding any generation entering the grid. So we pioneered a product called saving sessions, where we send, again, a price signal to say to customers, actually switch off now, and we'll pay you for switching off. And we've had customers save millions over the last year. And this is now a service that's recognised by the National Grid System within the UK, which has been amazing. So not only do we have customers that will use it at times when there's lots of energy, they'll also turn off when there isn't. The way that we do more of this, it's quite simple. It is electrifying society as quickly as we humanly can. And it's making sure that we are giving consumers the ability to participate through fitting low carbon technologies. So whether or not that is large scale batteries in an industrial context, or it is looking at small scale batteries in homes along with solar, along with trying to roll out EVs, for instance, as quickly as possible, which will have hopefully batteries that can save up to 2 days' worth of household energy into the future, or technology that integrates really well with renewables like heat pumps, combining that with technology and renewables, all of which will give super cheap electrons to consumers. And I think it's that which is going to really enable the rollout of renewables around the world extremely quickly.
If we stay on the power flexibility, I mean, we've seen that NHPC did a lot of effort on this. But maybe a question for you, Essar, about the power flexibility. It seems that it's remaining a challenge to scale at the India country. So, what's your point of view of this?
So, could you repeat that question?
Yeah, my question was about power flexibility because you need to address intermittencies for that. So how do you integrate this technology within your project? That's one. And second, what challenges remain in scaling this at the Indian level?
Sure. No, so if you see from an India overall electricity grid point of view, still out of the total energy generation, around 12 to 13% actually in energy terms is contributed by renewable energy. Mm-hmm. So still it forms a pretty small portion. But as we have a very ambitious program as a country, we want to do around 500 gigawatt by 2030-32, and then a program going forward, and we are adding more and more renewables. It is definitely going to bring a lot of challenges for the grid. The key challenges, of course, the intermittency is one issue, which is very clearly one issue which needs to be addressed. And we have already seen that, for example, Rajasthan, which is a big hub in India for solar, if there is a big cloud curve and suddenly the generation falls down, it has a big impact on the grid. Similarly, same we have seen in the case of wind as well, that during monsoons it becomes high and then there are curtailments. So that is why I think there is a very clear focus that how do we improve the overall, let's say, availability and reliability of renewable power. And if you see how the Indian market has transitioned, earlier we used to have a lot of plain vanilla solar wind. Now we have either hybrid tenders, round-the-clock tenders. We have dispatchable energy as required. So a lot of storage is coming into action. Fortunately, the pricing for battery storage has also been coming down substantially. And a lot of PSPs are under construction in the country. So as they come, we will have long duration storage as well. So I think these are some of the things. Of course, even the grid operators as well as they are from their side setting up large storage capacities at substations where they want to manage some of this. Demand management is another area which Octopus Energy just mentioned. I mean to say we still have a lot, I think, in the country to be done on the demand management side, but at least in terms of input of power, these are some of the key initiatives which are being done and taken. So that's how we are looking at it. And then I think another thing is as more and more, the only one important aspect is the transmission network doesn't get utilized very well, which again, if you ask any company in India, what is the biggest challenge today? It's the transmission network. That's another area to be addressed. The government is thinking about some policies, how they could, especially for the solar plants, which are operating, let's say, for not more than 50% of the time, how could we use the transmission network for the remaining time? So I think a lot of these initiatives are under discussion, how to utilize the transmission network and give a more reliable power overall.
No, you're right. This is one of the challenges, the infrastructure, and especially maybe in India, it's pretty aging. So maybe some new investment needs to be done to make sure that the grid stability is happening as well. Another challenge that I mentioned also in the introduction is about the supply chain. Maybe a question for you to Sprng Energy. It's the costs are rising a lot. I was reading in the Financial Times last time that the transformers were double or triple on this, and there's also a lot of shortage with this unbalance between supply and demand. So maybe our question to you is how can the renewable industry build more resilient supply chains?
So here again, as you know, this industry over the years has seen a lot of demand-supply mismatch, and there are phases when the industry has benefited because of the supply glut, and there are phases when the industry has suffered because of the capacities not being brought up. Solar module manufacturing has witnessed it very clearly. Now it is moving more towards, let's say, the rest of balance of plant. For example, transformers. Again, some of the critical material, whether it is CRGO or some other thing, they are controlled by certain countries, certain, let's say, manufacturing locations. So I think as overall as a renewable industry or our supply chain or the entire value chain's effort is how do you, let's say, mitigate your risks by diversifying your different sources, be it Japan, China, for example, for CRGO. And also very important is like India has a very strong domestic manufacturing focus right now. India wants to be a very serious contender other than China as a very strong manufacturing base. So that capacity is also in the build-up. But I think what is very important when any country has an ambitious program is to make sure that we are able to plan whatever barriers, sometimes tariff barriers, non-tariff barriers, and overall mitigation of supply chains in line with how the capacity is getting built up. For example, India is moving to domestic cells very soon, or in between, India had stopped bringing any CRGO, let's say, from China. I think some of those, we are facing a lot of constraint in our HVDC equipment today to build these lines. So I think what is important is how do we build either the domestic ecosystem before or mitigate. Otherwise, your this journey or our ambitious roadmap which we have planned will face a lot of challenges.
A question to Ayana. It's about the investment because attracting investment remains a challenge. So what framework or regulation or regulatory or financial reform would you advocate to make India's power sector more friendly for investors?
Yeah, so I think India has been attracting a lot of investments. I don't think that has been. So some of the things that have happened in the recent past have really transformed the whole, I would say, financial stability, the credibility of the distribution companies. One of the major things that the government brought about was the late payment surcharge scheme, LPS scheme, what we call it, whereby the regulation was that the distribution companies, if they are not able to liquidate the payments for the generating companies, then they are taken off the grid. So that scheme actually changed the whole dynamics in terms of payment security mechanism, in terms of the whole credit worthiness of the power purchase agreements. In addition to that, we have central off-takers, like we have chairman from NHPC here who bring in a lot of bids and bring certainty to the bid. Similarly, Solar Energy Corporation or NTPC or REMCL for the railways. So all these have brought in that required financial credibility and credit worthiness for the power purchase agreements. In addition to that, government itself has given a lot of emphasis and focus and transparency in terms of the whole bidding trajectory, how many bids are likely to come up, and there is a constant interaction that happens between the industry and the ministry on a regular monthly basis to address all the issues that are pertaining both on a day-to-day execution issues, also with respect to the policy and regulatory framework. Sometimes things get resolved quickly, but at least there is a forum in which issues are getting recorded and there is a mechanism by which things are getting into place. One of the other big change that we are expecting to come, which will actually help in terms of the distribution companies to become financially stable, is the amendment to the Electricity Act, where one of the proposal is to move away the subsidies that the state governments provide for certain section of the consumers, to be able to move those subsidies to the state balance sheet rather than have those liabilities on the distribution company's balance sheet. So what would that mean is that the distribution company would automatically become financially stable. That's one. And second aspect, I think, which is being deliberated is to move towards smart metering. And that will actually bring in a huge transformation in terms of bringing in the complete accountability right from generation to the consumption end. And also, the concepts of being able to have pre-card smart meters so the payment risk gets eliminated. Then the other, aspect is actually around getting the transmission and the distribution networks right, which is one of the things that my colleague Gaurav mentioned, because today we see a little bit of lag between the planned generation capacity addition and the corresponding transmission. So we are hoping pretty quickly those capacities to get bridged. And also in terms of, now we are looking at other, storage technologies like battery and pump storage. So battery obviously is gaining ground with lowering the costs. And also in terms of the pump storage, government is coming out with a lot of bids on pump storage projects, because pump storage would be much more environmentally friendly. So there is a strategy towards, trying to fix that. And then what Gaurav also mentioned was around the storage capacities to bring in the stability on the grid. And added to this, in terms of our own supply chain security, government has introduced production-linked incentive schemes so that domestic investment happens. We've now increased our module capacity, to about 35-40 gigawatts. Backward integration in terms of cell is going to kick in, because from next year again, cell is going to come under the restricted category. Turbines already we have very high level of localization. So all these efforts would give a lot of confidence to the people who would want to invest here. And in terms of investment here, FDA is completely allowed, so we don't see any restrictions. And Finance Ministry also looks in terms of other implications around withholding tax and others. There's some demands. Hopefully those gets addressed. Then I think as it is, India is an attractive destination and will continue to attract more. And this is one of the largest renewable energy markets in the whole world. So I don't think any investor in the world would ignore this market.
Yeah, thank you. You were talking about confidence for long-term investors, but if we look at the energy transition, of course, we're talking about solar and wind. But if I talk about the fuels, transition fuels, we can see some growing skepticism about the transition fuels. So how can the renewable sector can secure this long-term confidence for investors? Be a question for you, Essar. Yeah.
Sorry, can you just repeat the question?
No problem. Is we're talking about the topic was the transition fuel. So we see a lot of skepticism right now about hydrogen, ammonia, and all these molecules. The question is how to make sure we can make investor more confident on the long term.
No, suddenly I understand like there's a lot of apprehension in the market saying like whether the hydrogen and its derivatives, the green hydrogen and its derivatives is going to be a beneficial projects. Yes, I'd say like apprehensions are having the pace, but if we see the factor, we'll find that these are the projects which are not using any of the technologies which are newly born. Let's take example. If we just see the factor, the first one like for hydrogen, the major cost is going to be the clean electricity. If I'll say like the variable cost of electricity cost around 75 to 80% of uh, your hydrogen cost, right? So if I say like I have a confidence on the RE, why don't I have a confidence on the hydrogen? The second thing, electrolyzers, which would say like, yes, it's a new thing. No, it's a 50 or 5 decades back we are using the electrolyzers. It might be the scale is different, right? The efficiencies of electrolyzers is increasing day by day. The cost of electrolysis is going down. Hydrogen storage, which is earlier is a big game, now it's being getting deciphered by the industry. So we see in coming times probably there's a shift from your electricity storage to hydrogen storage. It might happen. So going into future, if it's say like these 4 5 factors which are already established in the industry, a combination of that will get the confidence. Suddenly, few of the projects just getting on the ground with the support of the government is required to boost the confidence of the market. But that happens in RE also. If we'll see the history and we'll see like the RE, how it developed in India, like if I see my journey, the first project I've done is just for 5 megawatts. And it's a big deal, right? And today, if I'll say and talk about a gigawatt at a single place, nobody minds that, right? Yeah, it's a transition phase. It takes its own time. And that's true for the green hydrogen and its derivatives. And being SR, right, we are very, very focused. We know, like, going forward, this is going to rule the market. This is going to boost the RE energy sector once again to a limit behind the roofs. So, the confidence of the financer will come once we establish, we make it happen actually on the ground. Might be the first one is a smaller one, as we have started with the RE sector. But eventually, seeing all the parameters which are being established with the industry for long, nothing is new, right? It's just an indication. So we believe like that will boost the confidence. The different stakeholders like the finances, like government, the government is going to play a major role in this because it's the same thing that happens to the RE for us, what we have witnessed. So eventually, having all the things integrated, the few projects on ground will help us to take the new leap towards the bigger and bigger game in hydrogen and derivative side, with the confidence of investors, stakeholders, everybody.
I mean, one of the key components of at least the success is the collaboration between different stakeholders, between the finance, the off takers, and the producers, and the government, and all the public.
It's always a contribution by all the stakeholders to make an industry reap the fruit. So we can't ignore even a single player and the contributions for everyone. See what the financial looks like. It says the project is stable, right? And once you are demonstrated on the ground, starting with small and then going to a big leap, it will be true.
So on this topic, I mean, for you and HPC, I mean, the collaboration between the government and the tech innovators. Do you see any difference of approach between the public sector and the private sector?
As I mentioned earlier, also the public sector can take more risk. Private sector doing very fine. Earlier, a lot of hydro projects were allocated to the private sectors. But unfortunately, because of the long gestation period, because of the high risk, because of the geological challenges, so private sector performance was not satisfactory. But now you see in the renewable energy, the performance of the private sector is tremendous. So the policy, due to the policy framework, policy initiatives, so therefore the hydro projects Presently, in India, almost more than 15,000 megawatt projects are under construction. So, out of that, more than 67% of that, 9,314 megawatt, it is being constructed by NHPC. So, within this year to another 3-4 years, we are going to commission the 9,314 megawatt project. And future projects also, we have the example of Arunachal Pradesh. Many projects were allocated to the private developers, but at the result was not satisfactory. Now all those projects, critical projects, are taken back and allocated to various government companies like NHPC, TSDC, NIPCO, SJVN. So all those projects are now going ahead smoothly. Recently, the government has allocated us new initiatives also. So 11,200 megawatt Siang Upper Multipurpose Project to NHPC, 2,700 megawatt Siang Lower Project on the Siang River. So many projects are in the pipeline. Mainly hydro projects are high risk, high capital intensive, so it is meant for the public sector. Government companies, they can take risk, and the government has also given policy framework and policy initiatives to promote the hydro sectors. You know that there is incentive, there is grant for flood moderation, storage scheme, there is grant for enabling infrastructure works. Many other initiatives are there by the government, but on the renewable energy fronts, especially on the solar, wind power, storage scheme, battery storage. Recently, I visited Kutch, Khavra. So I visited Khavra, where our project is also there, 1,000 megawatt. We are constructing the solar project. There I saw from the aircraft, I saw the sea of water and sea of solar panels. 30,000 gigawatt solar power plants are being installed. Out of that, 1,000 we are installing, mostly by Adani and many other private developers. So that means for the short-term projects and quick projects, the private sectors are doing extremely well. On the other fronts also, say green hydrogen. Many of the private developers have come up because green hydrogen has a very good future. The long-term storage required, large quantum storage is required with the addition of the solar energy and wind energy. So the pumped storage, which is quite similar to the hydro project development. So there the participation of both government company, public sector company and private sector companies are there. Private sector companies are also coming and doing very well, especially Greenco, Adani, Jindal and many other private sector projects. Green hydrogen is an area where large quantum of solar energy, renewable energy, intermittent energy can be utilized to produce green hydrogen, to produce ammonia, and India can be a world leader, can be a market hub for exporting green hydrogen or exporting ammonia to the various countries. So that is there. In green hydrogen area also, even in NHPC also, we have started 3 pilot projects. So one project in Leh with the fuel cell, then energy conversion, and one green hydrogen mobility project in Chamba district of Himachal Pradesh, one green hydrogen mobility project in Kargil area. So, and we have also started, we have written to the government of Bihar to start pilot project for green hydrogen mobility project in Patna. So these are our initiatives. Once our pilot projects are successful, we learn from the pilot projects, and we also intend to go into a large scale. And at the same time, technological advancements are also there, so which will reduce the cost of green hydrogen production and ammonia production. At the same time, as our friend told, the technological advancement, the solar cost is also coming down drastically. So NHPC has been assigned as a renewable energy implementing agency. In India, there are 4 companies, 4 public sector companies, including NHPC, SJVN, NTPC, and SECI. These 4 companies are assigned Renewable Energy Implementing Agency. So we have been given the target of to develop 10,000 megawatt solar power renewable energy every year to each company. So as NHPC also, we have tendered, and through REIA mode, we are working on 34 solar power projects and more than 14,000 megawatts. So, and many of the private developers in solar, in hybrid mode, and FDRE, RTC mode, so they are coming. Recently, we have floated a tender of 1,200 megawatt with solar and battery storage. The response was so good, we received more than 3,000 megawatt of bid. So when we floated the bid for 1,200 megawatt, we received. So with the green shoe option, we have awarded the 2,400 megawatt project with the solar and 2 hours battery storage of the 2 cycle, and the price is only 3 rupees 9 paisa per unit. So very, very competitive price. So private sector are also, for such short-term and low-risk projects, they are finding very lucrative, and they are coming forward. They are doing extremely well. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So I think we are, at least Kearney is convinced that we need to manage the multiple stakeholder about private sector, the public sector, the government, with the financial space as well. Maybe a question to all of you: how to best orchestrate this stakeholder? What's your view on this? And how can India develop a unified strategy or national strategy around this, around the renewable energy sector? Any idea, please?
Yeah, so I'll go first. So, India, as Shiv also mentioned, India has set up a very strong process right from the beginning of very transparent auctions for solar, wind, and now spread across technologies, which allowed every foreign player to participate with full transparency, and because of the FTI, allowed the sector to grow in a very big manner. It's one of the top markets in the world. But when any company gets a chance to develop a project, they would always try to go to a location which is the best in resource. So that's why most of our solar installations will be in Rajasthan, Gujarat as the first 2 priority, then maybe Andhra, etc. And wind would be Gujarat, Karnataka. But for a very uniform distribution and the right usage of resources across the country, I think it's very important that we are able to incentivize or come with policy which enables to use the evacuation infrastructure or generates investment across the country. For example, I mentioned earlier, the transmission system, especially the central transmission system, is very badly exhausted, but the state level networks are available. And as Shiv mentioned earlier, with all the regulatory reforms the government has done, for example, LPS, reforms in the electricity sector, they have brought a lot of credibility to all the distribution companies. So now we need to see a lot of state tenders, lot of tenders through REIAs, which are state specific, so that we go and start installing projects across the country. And this will, wherever there is investment, there is job creation. Of course, the tariff will be slightly higher, but it is required for a sustainable development. I think that's the first thing. I think on the demand side, very important is at India level, we need to ensure that the renewable purchase obligation is very well mandated, and all distribution companies, not only distribution companies, be it in industries, be it consumers, wherever the obligation, and earlier to your question on even for green hydrogen, let's say hydrogen obligation or green steel requirement, etc. I think that also needs to be mandated very clearly, which will create the right sort of demand for the country, a sustainable demand, and will lead to a very uniform development. I think third is today, if you see in India, majority of our power gets traded through long-term bilateral contracts. 85% to 90% of our power is through bilateral contracts. I think another important thing which is required is that our depth of our power exchanges increases. We sell and we generate and sell power on the exchanges. I think that depth of the market needs to go, and which will see a lot of reforms, which Octopus Energy, for example, mentioned what is happening in UK. I think that's another important reform which needs to take place. I think all these things put together will create a market which will thrive. It is the right ecosystem with a very strong political will. All these factors come together and we'll have a self-sustaining market. Thank you.
Adding to that, in India, one sun, one nation, one grid. So with the approach, now the government is moving very strategically, developing solar power plants in the area where solar intensity is good, the wind power plants where the wind is substantial, and the hydropower plants in the hilly region, Himalayan region of the country, and the pumped storage plants mainly in the southern part of the country. So with all this and with the grid, the transmission system, there will not be any problem for generating at one place and consuming power at another part of the country. So yes, the government of India has planned and proceeding in a very systematic way for the unified approach of the generation and the consumption. The power is growing very rapidly because India is one of the most growing economy of the world, and that's why to support that our power demand is also increasing accordingly, and we are moving ahead in that way. You will be surprised that our Honorable Prime Minister fixed the target of 500 gigawatt renewable energy capacity by 2030. We have crossed more than 209 gigawatt by this time, and we are sure that before 2030 we are going to achieve the way the government is promoting, the way all the unified approach is there, that public sector, private sectors all have joined hands, and they are developing the renewable energy like anyway, and we will achieve before the target 2030. Thank you.
One question for you, Octopus. Now, one thing about we're talking about different stakeholder collaboration, but we were talking about innovation as well, and you did a lot of innovation on tariff, on pricing, on different things. Maybe one for you is about the innovative financing model. Do you see any mechanism to put in place to make sure we can have a steady cash flow or the cash flow capital flow for renewables?
Sure. I think it's an interesting one, because I think if I had the silver bullet solution for financing all renewables, I probably wouldn't be working at Octopus. I'd be off on an island somewhere sunbathing. But I think it has to be a blend of things. we've seen in the market things like corporate PPAs and bonds, but standing back, they all play to certain audiences. So corporate PPAs, great for getting off the ground projects for large industry, but not necessarily to millions of households and consumers. Green bonds, brilliant, again, if you're looking for institutional capital and to bring that into the market. Along with institutional capital, of course, comes more principles and more, I suppose, regulations around things specifically like ESG, which comes with it. I think also there are things like blended finance, which is brilliant, again, for getting specifically new projects or new concepts and technologies off the ground. So looking at private capital and concessional finance, but no one of those will play to creating gigawatts across a market. I think they all, have their own sectors. Standing back, I think just listening to some of the colleagues on the panel here, what they're saying really does ring true. So it's things that a market can show the world that it's offering, that can stabilize risk and manage risk. So I look at the offshore wind industry, for instance, in Europe, which has really taken off, and specifically in the UK and France. What the government gives is very clear certainty that they want development in certain areas. So they will give you a zone, and alongside that may come a price mechanism like a CFD, a price stabilizer, I should say. And it also could bring things like certainty on grid connection. It strikes me, I think, this ability as well that in India and specifically we're talking about, where there is some certainty on the supply chain, right? So we're talking about manufacturing renewables close to source that are then going on to supply projects. That is something we don't have in Europe, and I think is highly attractive because we are sourcing so much outside of Europe. And there are things that if we're looking to invest in a country, I think we could learn hugely from there. I also think when I stand back and look at financing, there are obviously all the different financing parties and mechanisms and models. But again, we have to look to society. And actually just last week, as Octopus, we did launch a new initiative, which was for consumers of energy, so customers, to be able to invest in their local projects for the first time. And it's had a really incredible reaction. So societal funding of projects. And within 24 hours, it was around 50% sold out. And actually, I think where we're stood today, it will, I know it was 3/4 last night, so I think it will be completely sold out. But I think things like that, which can bring renewable consumption closer to individuals, where they really feel like they can participate, maybe not just from an ownership slice, but of course benefiting from cheaper bills, in the ways I was describing before, are going to be super important into the future. So I think anything governments can be putting in place to support kind of societal demand as well shouldn't be ignored here.
I think we are almost at the top of the hour, so thank you for your insight and your point of view, for all of you. Thanks for that. I think India has a bright future in the renewable space, and I'm sure you're going to attract a lot of investors. So thanks for that, and that's it.
Not only in India, we are promoting the development of hydro projects in the neighboring countries also. In Nepal, the NHPC and SJVN, both are doing so many hydro projects in Nepal. Government of India is promoting development of hydro projects in Bhutan also. So India, with the unified approach that providing 24/7 power to all the consumers at cheaper, cleaner and reliable power to everybody. At the same time, we are helping the neighboring countries also to develop their renewable energy sources like Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh. So this is the
global play.
Approach. Yeah.
And just to add one point, Jérôme,
Yes.
India is now looking forward to being a green ammonia or a green hydrogen supplier. India, we've already signed, a lot of people have already signed agreements with Europe and Japan. So hopefully, we should see that India becoming a major contributor of green ammonia and green hydrogen for rest of the world.
Just to add, ammonia, you can say electron to molecule is going to be the future for the RE. So the promising thing is once we get from electron to molecule, the challenge is transferability and all those things. You have to be within state. You are having a grid system to be there. That it's got eliminated. Once you are green ammonia, means you can transport anywhere across the world. And India, we understand we need the foreign exchange. So that's one of major sector which is going to boom. And as I spoke earlier, we have to remove our apprehensions, look forward that the molecule story, the green molecule story, is going to be the real hit in the near future. And the world is going to get the global transition through that only.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.